This is the Internet Court of Truth and Lies, and its purpose is really to allow people to pose something that they think is true to see what other people think. The method is basically to dissect truths or lies to keep the conversation on the topic, which is whether or not something is true or something is a lie. We run hundreds and hundreds of these trials. We find that plaintiffs often learn something from the jurors who are providing their dissection in terms of answering the verdict questions. And that gives everybody a chance to see how other people think. In fact, the trial today is on precisely that subject, which is seeing how other people think, which turns out to be really interesting. There was a poem written by a guy named John Godfrey Saxe, S-A-X, who was from Massachusetts. And his book of poems was published, which I have here, from 1885. And Saxe is quite famous for one poem, which is The Blind Men and the Elephant, which is what this trial is about. I'm going to argue is that things like human feelings, history, science, truth, lies, religion, society are explained by natural language as a means by which these things are communicated. No matter what you want to talk about, you use natural language to communicate it. Out of which the conclusion is that the actual thing, the elephant in the room that's actually being described when you're communicating something about science or history or feelings or society, is the natural language itself, which sounds very strange, but natural language is very special. It's special in a way that Saxe's poem brings out beautifully. I would expect that a fair number of y'all have never heard of the poem. Saxe, as a poet, was quite famous in the late 1800s. He's American. He wrote these beautiful poems, the most famous of which is this one, which is The Blind Man and the Elephant. I'll read the poem. So the blind man and the elephant, and he called it a Hindu fable, which is obviously misspelled Hindu. It was 6 men of Indostan to learning much inclined who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. So everybody was looking for the truth. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl. God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall. The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp. To me is mighty clear, this wonder of an elephant is very like a spear. The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, thus boldly up and spake, I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a snake. The fourth reached out his eager hand and felt about the knee. What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain, quoth he. 'Tis clear enough the elephant is very like a tree. The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, E'en the blindest man can tell what this resembles most. Deny the fact who can, this marvel of an elephant is very like a fan. The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope. I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a rope. And so these men of Hindustan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion, exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right and all were in the wrong. So oft in theologic wars, the disputants, I ween, rail on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prate about an elephant not one of them has seen. So part of my argument in this, which is the basis for this case, is that this is really the story of when you watch mainstream media, you're looking at people describing part of the truth that they see, but it's not the truth that you would see. And nobody really is seeing necessarily the real truth. My argument, the real truth here is that we're communicating with each other in natural language, and natural language inherently prevents you from communicating your entire knowledge of the experience in a way that everyone could confirm is true to them. It comes from how the brain computes, and I'm a computational cognitive scientist. We have about 100 billion neurons between our ears. And on average, every neuron has about 3,000 compute points on it. And every compute point is processing a predication. Predication is a subject and a predicate that forms a predication. The subject and the predicate alone, if, for example, the elephant is a fan, the subject is the elephant, fan is the predicate. You put those two together and it's either true or false. Our brains are computing 100 billion times 3,000, which I think is 300 trillion truths and falsities essentially all the time while we're awake. Except there'll be some subset of that. The numbers we get typically is in the brain when you're just hearing a simple sentence, or when you were listening to that poem, your brain was processing at any given moment about 200 billion propositions, which is crazy. So one of the arguments we have is Freud was right when he said that most brain processing is unconscious. He was horribly wrong, and that he greatly underestimated the amount of unconscious brain processing that goes on. But when you try to communicate through language, you can only communicate very little of all of the predications that your brain is seeing. You communicate what you can, and you feel like that's a good communication. But to other people, it's very likely not a good communication. This poem by Saxe really brings that out. It brings out this whole idea that people are just trying to explain what they're seeing to other people. All of those blind men are talking, and they're talking to the other blind men that are listening, even though none of them can see. But they are using natural language. So the elephant in this whole process is natural language that just inherently makes it impossible. The brain is computing a lot more than you can possibly talk about in natural language. One of the consequences of this is that every sentence can be seen as true, or any sentence can be seen as a lie, depending upon the context that's brought to it. And the context is just a predication around the predications for a sentence. What I'm basically arguing is that things like human feelings, history, science, truth, lies, religion, society are explained by natural language as the means by which these things are communicated, out of which the conclusion is the actual thing. The elephant in the world being described is natural language. It is the fact that you're using natural language to describe the thing, and you will not be able to completely get all of the knowledge that your brain brought to that statement or whatever you're saying with natural language. It's just built to let one brain communicate with another. It's evolved that way, but it's only as good as a handful of predications that your brain selects can convey. The predications in the what it's called the surface structure of the sentences you say, and the context that your brain brings to those predications. So the real thing that goes on when we think people are lying, some people may think they're lying, some people may think they're telling the truth and they're being quite honest. Some people are lying too. But once you realize that what's going on is limited by the expressive power of natural language to get one brain to completely align with another brain, you begin to see a lot of the things that happen in the media and how media is caught in a trap where almost anything they say, if they have enough people listening to them and enough people who are evaluating them, they will be seen as either not telling the truth. So I did a verdict, and I think every juror should be doing their verdict if they haven't done it already while I'm doing mine, because you're going to need to finish your verdict in about 30 minutes. I'll go through the verdicts. And is it the truth? My argument is that what I've asserted is the truth. The elephant in the room is truly natural language. It's not so much the content of whatever was said in and of itself. It's the fact that you couldn't say all the content that you would have needed to say to align with all of the people that you're trying to talk to. And in fact, one of the reasons for the Internet Court of Lies is to provide an opportunity for a few people dissecting truths and lies to get together and see how their brains align. Because once you begin to see that, you begin to see the truth, the real truth about what I'm talking about. In this particular trial, we've got people who are new, who've never done this before. Okay. Is it the truth? Yes, I say natural language is the primary cause of the dominance of the human species on Earth. Speak in the language of the brain, but we can't say everything that our brain has predicated on the predications that we're speaking, that we will disagree. Is it the whole truth? I said yes, there's no other primary intensive communication between human brains provided by nothing else. As if you look at any other mechanism, you could say pictures do it, but they don't. Of course, part of natural languages are nonverbals, like what I'm doing with my hands. Know that because people who speak different languages a lot of their facial expressions and other body expressions and so forth and so on, they can communicate with that. So there are natural language features in things other than just speech. But they all have the same problem. There's always the same problem. There's no other primary cause. Is it nothing but the truth? I said, yes, it's nothing but the truth. We're real convinced of this through our studies of actually watching brains compute. There are devices that are called fMRI or EEG brain scan, and we can actually watch the amount of neuron computation that goes on. You can get an idea of how many neurons are between your ears and wires. You can claim so many of them are computing on single sentences. If you take simple things like your retinas, so you got two eyes, each has a retina, each has about 100 million, we can count these, 100 million neurons in them. And each of those neurons has hundreds of synapses. Each of the synapses is one of these compute points that's putting us, if it takes a little green dot or something, it contextualizes that green dot and say this is part of a leaf. And that's predicating that green dot. And that's 100 million times, let's say 1,000. So that's 100 billion per eye going off reading something. And that's where you get these huge numbers. And if you go back deeper into the brain and other places, we see that about a cubic centimeter of neurons light up for any given sentence you can hear, even simple sentences like the table is near the window. That'll light up a cubic centimeter of neurons, which is vastly more than the number of neurons in your retinas. Brain depends on the content itself where these things light up. What's the deceit? So I said there's no deceit. This is what I've been doing for 50 years, and I honestly don't think there's any here. I try to express things in ways that people can understand what people like me have come to believe. Is a deceit of truth intended? I fully intend to tell a truth here that I think is worth telling. What's the motivation? The motivation is to be informative, which is what I just said. It's worth telling. What's the social acceptability? I believe it's fully acceptable. I also believe other people will think it is things opposing thumbs or hands or intelligence that differentiates us from animals, whereas people like me think that the differentiation is really humans have a unique organ in the left hemisphere of your brain. Most everybody has the left hemisphere for natural language, which is evolved and is completely unique to humans. There is no other animal with this natural language organ that's right around here. And it's evolved. And it's evolved recently, like we don't know how long, but on the order of less than 1 million years. You could argue that it wasn't sort of fully evolved until about 50,000 years or 80,000 years ago. We really don't know, but we know this is what makes humans human. There's this communication ability to communicate the predications that go on in your brain that go on in the brains of rabbits as well. They think too. What label will improve the social acceptability of the truth or lie? Whoa, it looks like I said, it looks like I said it's untrue, which I was wrong. That's what I said. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the jurors, and I'd like to get about a 20 or 30-second summary of your verdict. I've never presented this to anybody before, so I have no idea what you're going to think. I've never presented as Saxe's point argument for what we believe in computational cognitive neuroscience. So, juror one.
Hi, good evening. I said yes, it is the truth. Natural language is the primary cause of dominance of human species on Earth. It's the fundamental structure through which all aspects of reality are perceived and communicated. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Juror two, you agreed. I'm sorry. Yep.
The idea that natural language is the fundamental elephant in the room. Behind everything we understand, our feelings, history, science, truths, lies, religion, and society, means that language is not just a tool for describing reality, but the very framework through which we experience and make sense of the world. This perspective holds that searching for meaning or truth outside of language overlooks the fact that language itself shapes our perception of reality. It is true that all human knowledge and communication depend on it. However, whether language represents the whole absolute truth remains uncertain, since there could be aspects of reality that exist independently of the words we use. For me, the statement you have made seems to be intended to highlight the importance of language in constructing meaning, challenging the assumption that truth lies behind it. Socially, the idea is widely acceptable, especially in intellectual and philosophical discussions, as it encourages deeper thought about how languages influences our understanding, even if it may question more traditional or fixed views of truth. Thank you.
Juror three.
Either. I said that the way I see it, our world is filtered through language, and if we ignore that, then we basically ignoring the very basis of communication. I gave an example. I said that if we look at history, for example, we don't physically experience it, but when we read or hear about it, we can understand how other people experience a certain time period, let's say. Yeah, that's what I said in how I'm interpreting this and how I'm understanding this. If you don't look at language as the foundation for things, then you're not really going to be able to understand a lot of things. Is it?
Yeah. Wow. Juror four.
Yeah, I did say that your statement is, or your argument is the truth, mostly because the basis of which we understand and conceptualize everything is through natural language. So, in a sense, you can't necessarily say anything else is more human and more unique to us than natural language as it is. That's what essentially caused us or led to us being able to be the dominant species that we are.
I didn't expect this many people to agree. Juror five. I had no idea. I'm always surprised. It's just amazing that I somehow communicated what I meant. So, juror five.
Yes, to summarize all of my verdicts in one saying is that I would say that yes, I do agree with the statement that you've put forward, but I feel like it's nuanced because yes, conversation and language gives us an absolute truth, or it rather labels things as an absolute truth in a way that we can understand it completely. However, I feel like we would still be able to grasp certain things even without language because I feel like we're able to grasp things even now with language barriers and people that we see. I feel like that we're able to still understand them from, I guess, hand gestures and stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like it's nuanced. While language does give us an absolute truth and gives labels to specific things, I feel like we can still understand some things somewhat, not to its full extent though.
What you just said, I think, is similar to what Saxe was arguing. What he was arguing was that even though there were six men, so there were six things that they were seeing, but they were all true. And so all of their answers were true, given what they could feel. with their hands. But you had to total them all together before you had an understanding of the whole truth, which is very weird. What that says is that if you say something and you engage other people in trying to understand what you said, then the totality of what they say will reveal the truth, but not what the individuals say. What the individuals will say will be some part of the truth. That's really the theme of Saxe's poem. Okay. My argument is the whole truth is natural language. Natural language has this property, which really requires dialogue among people for people to begin to understand how any particular thing is understood by other people so that there can be some convergence on an understanding of what the truth was that was originally experienced by perhaps one of the people. Juror 6.
Yes, I'm inclined to agree with you as well. And I don't only think that just language in terms of words being spoken counts as language. Like you said, the men were interpreting it differently, yet it was all a version of the truth. So I do agree with you, like 100%. There are many forms of language, art, whatever you may do to communicate something. So I do think that it is, I agree with you. But I just have a question. I'd like to know, why did you disagree with yourself? It, like you said, it was untrue at the final verdict.
I was filling out the verdict in the last one. I think something was going on in my mind, which I don't even remember because I did this verdict a while back. I was not thinking clearly and I clicked the wrong button and didn't notice that I'd clicked the wrong button. I apologize. I make a lot of mistakes. But I'm a scientist and I expect to make mistakes. But I try not to as best I can. Juror 7.
I would like to say that I agree that language is the main way we share and understand feelings, history, science, and society.
Sounds good. Juror 8.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good morning on your side. I also fully agree with the accusations, and that language is something that we need to take serious. Just before I continue, there was like, I don't know if I can say the words, a similar case that was happening in South Africa like this. It was in Neisner, where a blind man, it's like literally the same thing. It's where a blind man went to an elephant park, and me, my sister, and my sister's friend were at the same elephant park. And then I never knew that elephants can sense like feelings and all of those kind of things. And then at once, the elephant sensed that this person is blind and he got guided by someone else. So as we approach the fence where the elephants is, the one guy came and gave some fruits in a basket for the blind man. And then they told the blind man he needs to feed the elephant, but then they also asked the other guy to leave the blind man's hand. So the guy left, just walk away from the blind man, and then the elephant took one of the fruits out of the basket, ate it, and then he put his slurp around the blind man's arm and guide him from one side to another, like where the small elephants is. So I feel like they sense not only by humans that can speak by their own language or whereby they know, I don't know how to say it, but it was very strange.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that the language is a window on the brain, but the brain is really computing all these predications about what you're seeing and your reasoning and all these other things is not what you're talking, is not the natural language. Natural language is spoken in predications, but it's a very small sample of the predications that are actually going on in your brain. And so my interpretation of this, what you just said about the elephant, is yes, elephants are thinking. They don't have natural language. They can't communicate their thoughts like humans can communicate their thoughts. But the
Yes,
thoughts between elephants and humans are, for the rest of the brain, very similar. Okay. In other words, the elephant sensed it may have actually figured out that person couldn't see, but it couldn't communicate that directly. It couldn't say, "Oh, I see that he's blind."
but
Not possible.
that's the main thing. That is the point I was trying to make. Like, I was shocked. It was like the first time I saw something like it happens with me, like
Yeah.
in front of me, where hereby I never saw something like this, and it just sends and all the movements. It literally it feels like he communicate with a human, and the human is giving the same energy that the elephant wants from him. Like it's something like that. So it was very strange for me. There wasn't words. They didn't share any verbally words, but the movement and the connection between the two was the same.
It's because neural systems or brains are remarkably similar in terms of what they compute across different animal species. And it's not a surprise that once you've interacted with the elephant a little bit, and I haven't had this experience you had, but I've had a little bit of an experience with elephants. And I did have the same kind of thing happen, which is that I realized that the elephant and I were actually communicating with each other, that there really was something thinking there, and it was understanding me, even though it couldn't understand a word I said. And I certainly couldn't understand what an elephant was saying, but we were communicating. But what the elephant lacks is a natural language organ, which is unique to humans, that can take anything that the brain is thinking or computing and talk about it. So I can talk about what my eyes see. That's a very difficult thing to communicate to an elephant. It's totally unique to humans. So it's just crazy. So I really appreciate that. Was great. Thanks. That was great. I'm good with this trial next Thursday, and it's another interesting case that on a Medium article that I wrote. Oh, by the way, if you haven't seen this yet, and you
Sorry.
can pass this around. This is my dashboard. You see the sponsors for the different trials.
I've seen that.
Yeah, right now I'm the only sponsor for my trials, which are on these Medium articles. But if somebody comes in to sponsor trials, this would happen. This is 33 of the trials that I've run on 33 different Medium papers. I've written about 200 papers. So, well, you can actually watch the trial. The sponsor can adjust this. So if I wanted to, as a sponsor, I could have said, you can't see my trials and you would not be able to see them. But Bright Plaza is the sponsor for all the other trials. So now finally, here you've got all the trials that have been run for a long time. It's 521 trials that have been run.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so we've run a lot of trials, and here they all are, and everybody can view all of the trials if you've got an account. So now you can go back and see all the trials.
That's neat. I was looking at it the other day.
Yeah. So finally, we have a way that people can see all the trials if the sponsors permit it.